So how then does, South Africa also begin to contend with this? Because there is, of course, a statement by the South African Jewish Board of Deputies that's also calling on South Africa to put pressure on Hamas to make sure that the hostages are also released, but also listening to the ANC's Nomvula Mokonyane saying that they will continue the meetings with the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, and they will then make sure that this does put them, into a situation where they find one another, as she says. And she says that this, the statement that they released a little earlier on, in her view, is a narrow view, she calls it. And she says that she is hoping that at some point they are going to be able to find one another. So there's been quite a lot of talk, particularly about this ruling. You listened to even Professor Chan from the Oriental School, even earlier on, talking about how this case has mobilized international opinion on the war in Gaza, and also looking at some of what you're seeing there on the screen right now as some of the, part of the orders that were made by the court. Of course, provisional, as the court said, that at some point it is going to be looking into the merits of this matter. And some legal analysts have said that this could take even years, months, and, at this point, it's anybody's guess as to how much time will those arguments take. But let's get more reaction now and speak to Roshan Dadoo, South Africa's BDS Coalition Spokesperson. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Let's start with, speaking to some on the show. There's mixed reaction. Others are welcoming, what the court have said, but others are saying that the court stopped short of ordering an immediate ceasefire. And for them, that is a bit of a disappointment.
I mean, I think we can clearly see that Israel has lost. It's lost in the application, in the response it took to our application that we listened to a few weeks ago. It made two very weak points there. The first one was jurisdictional. It tried to say that there was no dispute between South Africa and Israel. And I think today we heard that the court clearly ruled that out. Secondly, it tried to argue that it was allowing in more humanitarian aid. And again, the court didn't give that any credence. It didn't believe that there was sufficient humanitarian aid going into the Gaza Strip. But most importantly, the court has ruled that Israel is plausibly committing the crime against humanity of genocide under the Genocide Convention. And they will be taking this case, the substance of the case, further. Now that, yes, can take a number of years. And yes, that doesn't, as we all want to see, an immediate end, a ceasefire, an immediate end to the hostilities, to the killings, the massacres, the destruction of hospitals, of schools. And we're seeing even today that continuing. And we know that the Israeli government have been continuing to state their intent to commit genocide. Even yesterday, the Minister of Heritage said, again, he said, we should nuke Gaza. He said, I know I've been taken to the ICJ for saying this, and I'm going to say it again. I mean, if that's not stating an intent again and again to commit the crime of genocide, I don't know what is. So, yes, it's great that the court has decided that it is going to take this case further. On the provisional measures, I think we should look at what our minister said. On the first provisional measure, of course, we wanted them to accept the 9 provisional measures that South Africa had requested, and we suspected that they would not just do so as is. On the first one that they ruled on, though, as our minister said when she came out of directly after she came out of the hearing, she said to the press, okay, so what they have ruled on, how do you provide aid and water without a ceasefire? If you read the order, by implication, a ceasefire must happen. And I think that means it's incumbent on all of us, on civil society around the world, to maintain that pressure and that call for an immediate permanent ceasefire on Israel.
Roshan, one thing, that we've been talking about here on the show tonight has been, yes, this ruling has happened, but what does it mean at a practical level for the people in Gaza tonight who are possibly worried about the situation further escalating? I mean, listening to the court saying that, there is urgency in this matter because this catastrophic humanitarian crisis can further, escalate as it continues to now probe the merits of the matter. And I wonder, in your view then, what does it all mean for the people of Gaza tonight?
Absolutely. And what obviously all of us, people around the world, people in South Africa want to see is a ceasefire. We want to see enough humanitarian aid going into Gaza. We want to not only see that, but we want to see the people of Palestine being able to live in freedom, the return of the refugees. We want to see a truly equal society in Palestine in which everybody who lives there can flourish. And of course, this court ruling is not going to make that happen, and it's not going to make that happen overnight. International law is just one tool, and it's a tool that states can wield. And we're really happy that our state has been bold enough to challenge a country that is backed by the West, a country that is a colonizing country, a settler colonial country, that a country that has defeated apartheid, that has defeated settler colonialism, can take this case and test the limits of international law. We know that our country is also calling for all sorts of reforms to the international order, to the international legal system and the United Nations. This is another way in which we're pushing the powerful countries in the world, and in particular, of course, the United States, that is funding the genocide. It's not only complicit, it's participating in the genocide. Now, the court ruling today says it also, as a state party, has to act to prevent that. Now, if it continues to fund and continues to send weapons to commit genocide, we have to, as people around the world, we've seen people in America, Jewish people in America, taking over stations, taking over the Statue of Liberty, mobilizing in unprecedented numbers, as in Europe, as in the UK. And we in South Africa have to do the same. We have to keep the momentum going, because now people, obviously around the world, are looking to South Africa to see what we're going to do next, what solidarity, how we're going to demonstrate that solidarity. And we will never, ever let the Palestinian people down. I think that's what our government showed today. And we, as people in South Africa, people in Africa and in the global South, have to up our game. We have to keep that pressure on. We have to campaign for boycotts, divestments and sanctions, ultimately. Exactly the call that Palestinians making on us, that we made on the international community, to support our struggle, our armed struggle, our popular uprisings, our trade union struggles. Yeah. We have an obligation to do the same.
And Roshan, finally, then, we were in conversation with a human rights lawyer, an Israeli human rights lawyer, who say that while they regret, the loss of life and the devastation, there is that call that they continue to reiterate around the release of the hostages, and the court also talking about this issue as well.
For the hostages to be released, you need to implement a ceasefire. Even Hamas said that yesterday. They will release hostages that they have in return for hostages that Israel has of Palestinians. More people have been arrested in the West Bank since the last time that prisoners were released. So if you're serious about getting the hostages returned on both sides, implement a ceasefire. It's quite clear. And in fact, that is what the court in effect is saying today.
Roshan, thank you. Appreciate your time this evening. Do appreciate that reaction. That was Roshan Dadoo, South Africa's BDS Coalition Spokesperson.